Two more coaches that are on the list of potential candidates for the Saints 2025 head coaching job, both from the defensive side of the ball. One I have mixed feelings on, one I'm a little stronger on. We'll talk about them both. I'm Tim. Let's talk Saints. Taking a look at Aaron Glenn's resume, um, it's kind of an interesting one in a weird sort of way because there's not a lot on it, but he's been in the league for a while, not a lot of different places, but he's by reputation been pretty successful, especially in the coaching stints in New Orleans and Detroit. So just don't know where to place him because I mean he kind of jumped in 2012, 2013. He was a personnel scout for the Jets. Mike Pettin was one of the disaster of stretch of Cleveland coaches going on for most of the 20 teens, and he was hired there as an assistant DB coach. So I don't know if you can take anything really away from those first two stops once he kind of got into the NFL coaching slash personnel side of the game. Then he gets hired by the Saints, and we all know 2016 to 2020, which was the height, the pinnacle of the NFL passing era, with the 5,000-yard seasons and 40 plus touchdowns and all this crazy stuff going on that we don't see anymore. That's been on a very sharp decline since basically 2021 till now. But at the height of it, if you stop back and think, as a unit, our defensive backs held up for the most part. So I think he did a pretty good coaching job. That's the guy that bullets and bombs were flying all over the place downfield back in those days. It was literally the pinnacle of the wild wild west of offenses. And we can all think back about plays that his guys were involved in. The Minneapolis Miracle that got us knocked out of the playoffs. Um, it was stabilized a lot and helped him out a lot when Marshawn Lattimore showed up. But at times we struggled to fill that other corner, and they would get picked on. But he we as a team always seemed to kind of come up with an answer when we needed to stabilize that defensive backfield with personnel and the way they played. And above all, we made a lot of big plays were made on us, but those were the days when that was just going to happen. But if you think back during that stretch, we also made a lot of big plays coming out of that secondary. Overall, again, yes, I know y'all are going to fill up the comments with specifics like the Minneapolis Miracle, but just saying as a general rule, if you think back to a lot of defensive backfields back in those days, and we did it to a bunch of them with our offense, where it was just going to be a monster shredding of the passing game that's going to blow their defense out of the building. I think that reputation, and then what he's doing, heading to his fourth year as defense coordinator with Detroit. Now, I mean, Dan Campbell brought him over from New Orleans when Campbell got the head coaching job in Detroit for a reason. And I don't think you can um, really give him any down marks for what's going on in Detroit. And we've talked about Ben Johnson on the offensive side a few videos ago, but that was a complete makeover they had to do, like what the Saints may be facing starting next year in 2025. And they made it over. And they figured out ways to win while they were rebuilding the roster, whether they were doing it through the draft. And he was fortunate to get a couple of really good ones in Hutchinson, who's hurt this year and out for the season. Branch, to name a couple. Some younger guys that they've added to the roster that stepped up. We have Will Harris right now. They had him during that 21-20-23 stretch, who played all over the place and played pretty decently for him, a lot like he's playing pretty good for us right now. Yeah. Aaron Glenn influence involved in that also. So by reputation, and I think by results, if you look closely, he's built considerable momentum as a guy that one day is going to get his shot as an NFL head coach somewhere. I just don't think it should be New Orleans. I'm not sold. I have a couple of things and on him where one of them is the resume, while impressive in some stops, namely the last two, roughly the last 8, 9 years of his coaching. It's a lot like Joe Brady. You look at some of that stuff, you go, man, that's some really impressive stuff that he's doing. But overall, I'm thinking again, much like Brady, I want to bring him in. I want to talk to him. Interview wise, I think you're doing yourself a disservice when the rest of the league is, and they could all be wrong. I get it. You don't have to drop that in the comments to remind me. But if there's enough of a buzz going around the league there, you got to bring these guys in and have a legitimate conversation with them, open minded, where you're like, if this guy can come up with the plan and present it and sell us on it, and really, if he walks in and sells it, he can get the front office to buy in legitimately, not a bunch of BS, but legitimately come in and buy in. I think he's got a little bit of a resume development where he can get his position players and then his defense to buy in a very similar, especially in Detroit, a very similar rebuild that we're about ready to go through. So you got to take him seriously. Um, but like Brady, and we won't be in the interview room to find out, but would really completely have to blow me away and go, well, we might have something there. I know this is a different side of the ball, but two of the better comparisons you can draw lately with a lot of success with kind of, I don't want to call them thin resume, but not as beefy as other coaches are going to walk in with. There's substance to it. There's just not a lot of different stops, different coaches, different, personnel, that sort of thing. But at one point, Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay were in the same category. And a lot of the doubts I'm talking about now, I'm sure Frisco and the Rams had. And they was kind of on the reputation of everybody else league wide going, man, those guys are really good. They're going to be head coaches someday, and they're going to be good ones. That's all I'm saying is if that buzz is real with Aaron Glenn. And to be honest, it seems to have kind of died down a little bit the last couple of weeks. But Detroit makes the playoff run that everybody's envisioning. You can bet it's going to go back up. But you got to bring those guys in the room and figure it out. And I gave you the two success examples. They have been plenty failures. So yes, I'm acknowledging that too in the back of my mind. But overall, just based on kind of what we're looking at, going, I don't. He may be ready. I just don't know if it's in New Orleans. I just don't know if it's in the fit. I just don't know if there's enough there, barring him coming in the room and blowing me away. If I can go, yeah, he and Joe Brady. I think I had said Brady. If you're bringing 6 people in for serious interviews, he's number 6. Glenn and him, that's where they are sitting down there. But I think you legitimately have to talk to him. I think legitimately both of them could wind up with, depending how the Black Monday goes, which I think is going to be pretty bad. They're probably going to wind up somewhere. So I think you got to have the conversation. The other thing that I'm a little wary of, and this conversation has been floated around a lot over the last few weeks when you're talking about potential head coaches, it applies to Rizzi in a weird sort of way. It definitely applies to him, but there's just a lot going, a feeling from the Saints fans, and I can't disagree with this feeling at all, although I'm not 100% buying into it. And I'll tell you why in a second. But the feeling that, look, we really need to get away from the Sean Payton era and definitely the Dennis Allen era. And coaches from their tree or under their influence, we want to stay away from. And I totally understand that feeling coming from fans, and even some media, I think, has kind of talked about that. But and that Rizzi would fall definitely in that category. But at the same time, Dan Campbell left here, and I don't know if you'd really put him under the Sean Payton tree. I guess you could. He was here for a few years as a tight end coach. But Glenn went with him, and that's been his influence for the last 4 years. And we can look at Dan Campbell and know that much like Darren Rizzi, so I will put this out there also, it's a total 180 from what we've seen from Dennis Allen in both of those. Um, and he's on the defensive side. So comparing him to Sean, it's definitely not apples and oranges, but it is in the sense of a fair comparison. If he's a guy much like Sean was when Sean showed up in 2006 with an innovative plan, going, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to start fixing stuff. I have a vision. It would be on the defensive side, which some people are scared of, but you know, I don't particularly care what side of the ball they are, or in the case of a Rizzy or a Campbell or a Harbaugh, guys that were never coordinators. I need them to be able to rebuild a lot. This isn't a quick fix and just a few things that's coming down the pipe. So that's why I think you need to have the conversation. My gut instinct, really, probably not the right guy, but I think he's on the qualifying as of right now for the list of going. You still have to bring him in and have a conversation with him. So you may miss out on a guy that becomes and I can't think of any off the top of my head right now, but for lack of a better phrase, the defensive Sean McVay type guy who shows up and boom. He's got the organizational part of it, got the leadership part of it, got the culture part of it locked down and improving it. In running the defensive side of the ball, and everything's going great. And his other main job is I've got to make good hires on the offensive side so they can run it. Is he that guy? We don't know. We're going to find out because, again, I'm pretty sure, if not this year, by next year, especially if Detroit keeps doing what they're doing, somebody's going to give him a head coaching job eventually. And to make sure I'm perfectly clear on it, I don't think it should be New Orleans in 2025, but I also don't think you can ignore him and not bring him in to talk to him and find out. Definitely have to have a conversation about Mike Vrabel. And this is an interesting one because if you would have thrown basically his resume in front of me prior to 2018 with the caveat is like, man, this guy's really good. He's going to be an NFL head coach one day. And I would respond with the same Brady and Glenn responses I've given previously when on these breakdowns. So you have to walk in the room and wow me. This may be a case of where you had a head coach do just exactly that. I was searching for kind of the Sean McVay example on the defensive side, mentioned just now in the Glenn portion of this video. Forgot totally, but Vrabel kind of fits that category. Because, look, longtime NFL linebacker, late 90s to I'm not quite sure exactly when he retired, but it's around probably 2009, 2010. So he goes into college and spends a year coaching linebackers at Ohio State. They give him the D line for 2 more years, parlays that into an NFL job with the Texans, 3 years as a linebacker coach, gets promoted in his 4th year there as the defensive coordinator. So you're looking, hey, that's a kind of a thin resume in the sense of not saying he didn't do fantastic in all these jobs that he had. There's really only 2 locations, one in college, one in the pros. 7, 8 years total in coaching, and suddenly he's walking in with the Titans job. So there was a lot of voices like we're talking about around the NFL that obviously were saying kind of the same things we're talking about some of the coordinators on our list as potential Saints coaches saying, look, we know there's not a lot there, but man, the guy is really good. Somebody's going to hire him eventually, get him in the room and talk to him. He gets in the room and he sells management and ownership, and they buy into it. And the results in Tennessee, which we're going to cover in a second, pretty good. Since his firing at Tennessee, he was there from 2018 to 2023. The Browns have had him as a consultant, and I think they listed both as a um, coaching consultant and a personnel consultant. Don't really know what that means. I'm kind of wondering if the Browns aren't maybe once again ready to fire another head coach come Black Monday, and they may be considering Vrabel as the coach in waiting, and that's why they locked him up to that job. Just going, man, hold on, you could be a head coach here because it seems like his name keeps popping up. He will be in 2025. Going to be shocked if he's not a head coach somewhere. Now, the Tennessee resume when he was there for those 6 years, it's not that bad. You know, you're kind of sitting there going, well, how did he get fired? I mean, the logical thing is, he missed the playoffs the last 2 years. Um, Wins were declining, had something to do with it, and it probably did, but the story goes a little deeper. But I mean, he showed up there in Tennessee, and they weren't exactly a stellar franchise at the time when he got there. And want to make note right there, he was hired by their GM at the time, John Robinson, kind of important. Um, Winning season, his first go around, finished third in the AFC South, but then he went on that 2019, 2020, 2021 stretch, 3 straight playoff appearances, a second place division finish, won it twice. In 2019, he made it all the way to the AFC Championship game. That was definitely his best playoff run, as you can see by the numbers, and loses to eventual Super Bowl champion Kansas City in that game. 2020, gets in. Baltimore knocks him out in the wild card round. And then in 2021, again, he wins the division, and he loses to Cincinnati in the divisional round, his first game in the playoffs that year, which Cincinnati went on to finish second in the Super Bowl that year. So 2 of his 3 knockouts were by teams that eventually represented the AFC in the big game there that year. So pretty decent showing in the situation where they were a very similar team. I don't know if they're quite the big rebuild that we may be looking at, but I put him in a similar boat, and he showed up and he did a lot of things pretty good till he started having some struggles in 2022 and 2023 and ultimately fired. And again, you know, you're not familiar with the situation or don't remember. Quite honestly, I knew there's some crap that went on there, but I couldn't remember it specifically. And one of the reasons why this video took so long is trying to go back and go through that mess because it was a mess. Robinson was the GM was fired after 2021. That was the guy that brought him in, and that was right at the end of the success that they were having. Rand Carthon took over as a new GM. Now, over that last 2-year period that he was there in 2022 and 2023, yes, Vrabel's the team performance. They had 2 losing seasons stacked up. It's some struggles. They had some offensive struggles during that time. Took a lot of heat on that. But it also went a little deeper because if you want to do the deep dive and start doing searches basically on why Mike Vrabel was fired, and you start finding some videos and some articles and stuff around that you kind of wade through, and it was a lot of I'm just gonna have to summarize best I can, but there's a lot of possible lack of communication, some misunderstandings, some tension, and that may be a kind word for what was going on. It may have been way more than tension between Vrabel and the front office and ownership, which was Carthon and owner Amy Adams Strunk. This is where it gets murky when you start reading all that because you don't know who to trust, who to believe. It's an ultimate he said versus he said, she said struggle. And one side of the equation is a coach, the other side is the GM and the owner. So who's going to lose that battle, whether it's deserved or not? Some of the things that were kind of brought up in these articles, and this one clicked in as soon as I read it. I do remember, and I kind of think this all started it off. I didn't really establish a timeline and all this mess. Quite honest with you, after a while reading it and watching some videos on it, it was It's the kind of thing I just don't want to spend time on doing. But just to get a feel of how everything went bad so fast there. But he made some statements when he was inducted to the New England Patriots Hall of Fame that rubbed people the wrong way in the Tennessee organization. I think the fan base. Um, I think there was a questioning of his commitment to the organization at that point, whether he really had a future there. And I think that was some of that was being pushed by ownership and Ray Carthon. Seemed to have been a power struggle going on between Vrabel and the front office and management of, philosophical differences and how the team, the leadership, the organizational, kind of your power play, so to speak, about the coach and the GM about who's going to control what and why and who should and what the results are going to be and what's going to work and not going to work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And like we said, their offense during that period was declining. The wins were declining with it, so that gives them a reason to go, man, look at this. In the last 2 years, he's barely 500. So I think a lot went wrong there real quick, and some of it. See, what the problem with this is reading into that you don't know what that's actually football based and what he did or didn't do. That maybe you go, maybe he should have been fired, as opposed to miscommunication. I guess you could say, or distrust, or from both sides. Not saying that either one necessarily did something wrong, or that Vrabel deserved to be fired, or that the owner and the GM were out to get him, or any. Because I did read and hear some stuff going that way in all this. I guess it's possible. I don't really know. Don't really care in the aspect of it's only important is if it's a total Vrabel issue that if you want to hire him to be the Saints coach, is he going to bring that with? Because there's a difference between fighting the man, so to speak, your GM, your owner, the team president, whoever's above you, when you have to fight for some players. But it's a completely different statement when it's total and all out warfare between the two, because overall that's going to destroy the organization also. And ultimately, when that happens, I mean, even if you're fighting for your players and everything as a coach, sooner or later, those are the bosses, and you're going to have to back off. So whatever friction went on there, how much percent of whose fault it was, I think it's safe to say they all probably could have fixed a lot of that before it ever got to that point. And then we'd be a little more sure if things were going the wrong way and they needed to make a coaching change because what was happening in the locker room, on the field, etc., or if this coaching change was just all the stuff going on outside the field where you had two parties involved that couldn't get along. I am not qualified to answer that. I'm sure there's people more familiar, the fans or whoever in that area during that time would have a much different opinion one way or the other. What exactly went on there? I just know it's kind of a warning flag, possibly, but maybe not. I mean, it's literally he versus he and she said, and the two on this side of the equation, that's the team owner and the guy running everything from the football operations side. So you're gonna lose that battle, if you want to keep fighting it. And maybe there was a reason he did and should have been done. And maybe that is the attitude you want to bring in the Saints. But just putting it out there in the stratosphere, that's kind of what went on there. As best I can tell from several years removed and not really closely following the team during that time or since, in the case of the Titans. But I mean, what he did in that span before everything started unraveling those last two seasons, it's a lot of stuff that whoever the Saints are going to hire is going to have to bring to the table to this team. And this somebody like him, I think, would be looking for a commitment, a lot like what we were talking about with Ben Johnson put out there the other day, especially knowing what's facing him, what's coming up. I think if you bring in a guy like him, you would have to give him a commitment. I think what he did in Tennessee shows it can be done, and I'm the guy that can do it. Now, again, he's got to walk in the room when you interview him and no BS. Lay the plan out and tell me how you did it, how you plan on doing it, what you need from me, and I'm gonna tell you what I need from you. That sort of exchange. Only difference is with him compared to some of the other guys we're talking about on this list. He's got the ultimate skin on the wall because he's done it once. You know, unlike he rolled in and took over a team that had, was perennial Kansas City type team in the last over that span, just going, man, show up, coach the team. As long as you're not a total moron, you got a lot of talent there. You're going to win a lot of games and be able to make a push. I think he had to do some very good coaching to pull off rather some of the stuff that went on in Tennessee during that span when, sad for 3-year stretch, one of which he's named coach of the year, which was, I believe, 2021. You got to take a hard look at this guy just based on that alone. Somebody's got to come and coach the team, but whoever does it has can't keep saying this enough every time I do one of these videos. Got to be able to come in and fix a whole bunch of problems. I think Vrabel's resume kind of backs that up. And as long as he can come in and play well and work with others, and others are going to play well and work with him, sort of like his first GM, John Robinson, I could not find any of these issues popping up when he was working for him. So if there is a relationship that can be made where both sides are okay and are going to work and pull together, I think Vrabel's a good guy that you want in the organization to help you do that. I would definitely have him way top at the Saints head coaching list right now. I kind of felt that way when this was first being talked about and his name came up. But you kind of go in and do the deep dive. It's like there's a lot of stuff to back up that feeling and go, you definitely need to get him in the room, and you definitely need to have an honest to God 100% total no BS conversation with him about taking over this head coaching job. So that's kind of the last two names of the more or less top 5 that I was looking at. We've done Rizzy, who's a work in progress resume right now, 4 games in, 4 games left. We'll kind of see how that turns out. I know it seems Ben Johnson and Joe Brady were the 2 leading names on the offensive side. Vrabel and Glenn, the 2 leading names on the defensive side. Things are going to change. This is being recorded in the middle of December. Things are going to change over the last 4 weeks of the regular season. They're going to change in the offseason. So we'll kind of see how we're sitting in a few weeks as far as what the head coaching prospects look like. And is this list going to change any, or new names going to get added, or some going to be taken off, whatever. So pretty sure we'll have a January revisit on that subject. But give me a thumbs up if you at least kind of marginally like the list so far, especially these 2 guys, and especially if you're with me going, I think if you're going to go this route, Vrabel's the best option of the 2. Drop them in the comments too. I know you will. You've been pretty vocal on the 3 previous videos on potential 2015 head coaches. So definitely let me know what you think. So kind of where it's sitting right now. If you're first time here, like the content, please give me a thumbs up. It always helps the algorithm. But like, share, subscribe, hit the notification, and just be available. We're live a couple times a week. We've got videos dropping various times in the week, just so you'll know when it's coming and you'll be able to watch. So till I see you next time, I'm Tim. Peace out and who dat.